They say silence can protect peace, but the moment I saw the unfamiliar construction sign on the edge of our family land, I knew peace was over. I'm Richard Hale, a retired farmer, a father, a widower, and the last living man in our family line to walk the fields my great-grandfather once tilled. The land has been with us for over a century. It's more than soil and trees, its memory, its blood, every season's harvest, every stone, every shadow. In the morning mist carries my family's name. Or so I thought. 2 weeks ago, I was trimming the old apple trees at sunrise like I always do when I noticed orange plastic fencing across the southern acres, and then the sign. Future site of Hale Heights Luxury Villas. Development by Silverstone Group. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I marched to the fence, called the number on the sign. The woman on the phone was polite, too polite. Yes, sir, the land transfer went through last month. The property is legally under Silverstone's name. Now the sale was executed by your son, Mr. David Hale. I remember laughing because I couldn't understand. My son, selling our ancestral land, without telling me. That night, I asked David to come over, just the two of us, no yelling, just a quiet dinner like we used to have when his mother was alive. He arrived in a suit too clean, too formal, like he was dressing for someone else's approval. I sat him down, poured 2 coffees, and slid the land deed across the table. What is this, David? He didn't flinch. Dad, I did what had to be done. It's just land. It's not like we live off it anymore. Just land. I stared at him as if I had never seen him before. You sold it without telling me, without my signature. And that's when he pulled out a second document, a power of attorney, signed by me, except I never signed that paper. I needed to show Claire's father I was serious about providing for her future. He said he's investing in Silverstone. Dad, this opens doors. So that's what I was, a locked door to be bypassed. Our heritage a pawn in someone else's chess game. In that moment, I felt my breath leave me. Not because of the betrayal, but because he truly believed he was right. Would you call the police on your own son? Would you sue the child you raised? Would you walk away from the only family you have left? What would you have done if you were me? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to follow for the next part of the story. Because I didn't yell, I didn't scream, I didn't beg. Instead, I made tea. And while David scrolled on his phone, I stepped into the other room. I opened the drawer where I keep the letters from my father and the backup keys to the land's original safety deposit box, because there are things my son doesn't know, things even the developers can't build over. And I wasn't done yet. It doesn't scream, it lingers, like the dust on the framed wedding photo of my late wife and me, or the faint scent of pine wood on my father's old jacket hanging behind the cellar door. That night after David left, I sat with a box I hadn't opened in years. It had my father's handwriting on top in thick black ink, to be open if the land is ever threatened. He wrote that after a developer tried to buy our farm in the 80s, my father turned him down without a second thought. Back then we still believed in something called legacy. Inside the box, a leather-bound notebook, old maps, and a letter addressed simply, "Son, if you're reading this, it means someone tried to sell what we bled for. I've done everything I could to keep our land in the family, but I know the world changes, and that blood doesn't always mean loyalty anymore. So I left a protection behind, one that no one knows exists but you. Wait, watch, then act. Trust your instincts. The land will know when you're ready." I must have read that letter 10 times. He didn't tell me what the protection was, but I had a hunch. The maps inside were marked with strange ink symbols near the creek, where the old irrigation tunnels were built, tunnels no one had used in decades. I lit the fireplace, poured myself a glass of bourbon, and did something I hadn't done in years. I planned. The next morning, I didn't go to the police, didn't call a lawyer, didn't scream on social media like David and his wife probably expected. I drove to the county archives. Because there's something people forget in this digital age. Real power still lies in paper, in deeds, in notarized documents, and in loopholes. It took me hours of dusty digging, but I found what I was looking for. An original land record from 1911, filed by my great-grandfather, with one critical clause. Land is bound by generational covenant. requiring unanimous signature from all living direct descendants for any sale of over 40% acreage. David had forged a power of attorney, but he hadn't secured unanimous consent because I never signed. The sale was invalid, but it gets better. Silverstone had already broken ground, illegally. Now, they weren't just guilty of fraudulent acquisition. They were guilty of trespass and environmental disruption. Because guess what? The Southern Acres? Wetland zone. Protected under state law since 1978. David never checked. So I had the documents copied, secured, filed injunction paperwork. Quietly, without telling anyone. Because this time, I wouldn't raise my voice. I would raise hell with a smile. By the time David texted me again, a week had passed. He said Silverstone was ready to break ground officially. He wanted me to be there for the ceremony, as if a man can bless the burial of his family's history. I agreed to come, and I wore the same boots I wore the day he was born. Old leather, cracked from decades of walking land, he just gave away. Claire was there too. Her father, Leonard Grayson, stood beside the Silverstone CEO. Flashy suits, photographers, champagne. It wasn't a groundbreaking. It was a burial. Dad, David said nervously, "You okay?" "I'm fine, son," I said. And then I turned to Leonard. "May I speak?" I asked, smiling. He nodded, probably assuming I'd say something about legacy and blessings. Instead, I pulled out a rolled legal document and handed it to the foreman. "You might want to pause the digging. That sale your company made it wasn't valid." David's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" I looked him in the eye. "I never signed anything. The land requires consent from every living heir under a generational covenant. That covenant was violated. The county court has already received the injunction." The silence hit harder than the hammers would have. Leonard's face turned pale. "You're bluffing." I handed him a second paper, a map showing the Southern Acres, circled in red. Protected wetlands. "You just broke state law by digging. I suggest you contact your legal team." David looked like a man who just realized he brought a match to a wildfire. I turned to the crowd of investors. "You were misled. You invested in stolen ground. But I'm here to offer you something different. A preservation agreement. The land can become a protected reserve, tax deductible, sponsored by the Hale Foundation. You'll still get your write-offs. And the land gets to live." No one clapped, but no one moved either, because every person there realized they had underestimated a farmer, because the fallout hadn't even started yet. That night, David showed up at my door, red-eyed, hands shaking. "You humiliated me." I let him speak, and when he was done, I handed him a folder. Inside, photos, bank statements, emails, all connecting Leonard Grayson to multiple shell companies, all laundering investor funds through Silverstone. David stared. "Where did you get this?" "You think you're the only one who can use a lawyer's son. I still have friends from when integrity meant something." He sat down. Quiet now, the boy who used to play with toy tractors at my feet, reduced to a man who didn't know who he was anymore. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to decide who you really are, David Grayson's puppet or a Hale." He didn't answer, but the next morning, Claire showed up at my house, alone, and what she said changed everything. She stood on my porch in jeans and a cardigan, no makeup, no designer bag, no smug grin like the one she wore at the groundbreaking. Claire looked human, not the ice-sculpted daughter of Leonard Grayson, but someone who had just realized everything was starting to crack. "Mr. Hale, Richard, can we talk?" I didn't say anything, just stepped aside and let her in. She walked into the living room like it hurt to breathe. "I didn't know about the forgery," she said, eyes red. "I swear on my life I didn't know David used a fake power of attorney." "I believe you," I said quietly, "because he didn't do it alone. Someone coached him." She flinched and then nodded. "My father," she whispered, "he told David that you'd just get over it. He said legacy was a dead man's dream." That line cut deeper than any lawyer ever could. Claire sat down on the edge of the couch, pulled something from her bag. A flash drive. There's something you need to see, but you can't tell David it came from me. I took it, loaded it into my laptop, and what I saw shook me to my core. Recordings of Leonard speaking to investors, saying the land was already a done deal, that the old man wouldn't be a problem, that David's too scared of losing Claire to stand up to anyone. They laughed, they joked, they planned a demolition of 100 years of history over wine and steak. There was also a document, one I hadn't seen before, a proposed guardianship order. Leonard had been preparing to declare me mentally unfit, to forcibly take full control of all my assets, with David's name signed under witness approval. I had to stand up. I couldn't sit anymore. My knees were trembling with rage, with grief. Claire, why are you showing me this now? She looked me straight in the eye. Because I'm pregnant, and I refuse to bring a child into that legacy unless something changes. Suddenly, this wasn't just about the land, or pride, or even betrayal. It was about what kind of man my son would become, and what kind of father he'd be. Claire wiped her eyes. I married your son because he had your goodness. I just didn't know how scared he was of losing everything trying to impress my father. Would you forgive Claire if you were me? I didn't promise Claire anything, but I made one thing clear. This child you're carrying, if they ever ask about their great-grandfather, I want you to be able to say he fought for something real. She left, and I called my lawyer, because I wasn't just defending my name now. I was protecting a future that hadn't even been born yet, and I had one more move left to play. I wore my oldest boots the day I walked into Leonard Grayson's office. Scuffed leather-cracked sole, the ones I used to wear harvesting corn in October. I did it on purpose. Let him smell the dust on my coat. Let him remember who I was. Because men like Leonard think wealth comes from press releases. But I come from a place where wealth is measured in winter survived in hands that never asked for help. His assistant tried to stop me at the door. I don't think you're... I looked her straight in the eye. Tell him Richard Hale is here. And tell him I brought paperwork. Leonard met me in his glass-paneled office with the same artificial grin he wore at the groundbreaking. Richard, this is unexpected. David didn't mention you had anything more to say. I'm not here to talk, Leonard. I'm here to end this. I dropped the folder onto his desk. He didn't even open it. Let me guess you're still clinging to some dusty law from the 1900s. You can't fight progress with nostalgia. I leaned forward. That's not nostalgia, that's federal evidence. Inside the folder was everything. The generational deed, the injunction, the wetland violation reports, the investor meeting recordings, and Claire's flash drive. When he saw the flash drive, his hand stopped. You broke about 6 laws, Leonard. Maybe more, but I'm not the one you should be worried about. He squinted. Oh, you planning to sue me? No, I said calmly, but the SEC, the Environmental Protection Agency, and State Ethics Board already received copies of that folder. I watched the color drain from his face like the tide pulling away from a dead shore. And David, he asked quietly, he has a choice to make. I replied, either he testifies to save himself and his unborn child's future, or he goes down with you. What would you do if your child stood on the edge of destruction? He stood frozen, the great Leonard Grayson, king of steel and concrete, undone by a man in work boots. I walked out without looking back. That night, David came to my porch again. He didn't knock this time, just sat on the bench, hands shaking. You really sent the files? I did, I said. Claire and I agreed this ends now. His voice cracked. I just wanted to be enough for her father, for everyone. I sat beside him. You were already enough, son. You just let someone else convince you otherwise. He cried for the first time since he was 10 years old, and for a moment I saw my boy again. Not the man who forged my name, but the child who once held my hand at harvest and said, one day this will be mine, and maybe he can still earn it back. They say justice moves slowly, but sometimes All it needs is a push from someone who still remembers what's worth fighting for. The court hearings were quiet. No cameras. No press. Leonard tried to spin it. Claimed it was a miscommunication between parties. But the files didn't lie. And the regulators didn't blink. Within a month, Silverstone Group halted all development. Leonard Grayson was forced to resign from 3 boards. And the state fined a company for illegal wetland disruption and forgery conspiracy. David was offered a deal. He testified, came clean, handed over every email and message. And in exchange, the charges against him were dropped. But the cost wasn't just legal. Claire moved out of her father's mansion, back into the guest house on my property. She said she wanted their child to be raised somewhere real, somewhere that meant something. As for David, he's been rebuilding, brick by brick. Every morning, he shows up at sunrise, helps me restore the old barn, fix the fencing, tend the apple trees. He doesn't talk much about what happened, and I don't push, because healing doesn't come from punishment. It comes from remembering who you were and who you can still choose to be. Would you forgive someone who tried to steal your legacy, or would you carry the anger forever? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow for more stories like this. Last week, we held a small gathering. No suits, no photographers, just neighbors, old friends, and one brand new baby boy named Henry Richard Hale. Claire placed in my arms and whispered, I wanted to grow up knowing what real strength looks like. I looked out at the land, still untouched, still breathing, still ours, and I thought about my father and his father before him, men who weathered storms, men who understood something the world keeps forgetting. You don't inherit land. You borrow it from your grandchildren. So I built something new, the Hale Foundation for Agricultural Heritage, an education center, a seed bank, a place where children can learn the value of work, of land, of roots. And on the entrance wall, etched in iron, is a single sentence. The land remembers who you are, even when you forget. Thank you for following this journey. If this story moved you, tap like, leave a comment, and follow for more original stories about family, betrayal, and redemption. Which part hit you the hardest? Let me know below. And remember, sometimes the quietest voices carry the deepest roots.